Welcome. My name is Derek Levy. I'm the Acting Associate Dean for Student Support Programs here at Shoreline Community College. It's my great honor to moderate this discussion this evening by this distinguished panel of military veterans. Tonight's discussion is a collaboration between the college's Global Affairs Center and Veterans Programs. This event is also part of our partnership with the USA Vietnam War Commemoration Project in the Department of Defense. Our U.S. military has a single mission to preserve the security of the United States. Diversity, inclusion, and equal opportunity are three terms that are often used interchangeably in discussions such as the one we're about to have here. The Department of Defense's definitions of diversity and equal opportunity have changed over time, as have its policies towards inclusion of various demographic groups. These changes have often paralleled social and legal changes in the civilian sector. Tonight we will hear from individuals who have been on the front lines of some of those changes over the past 40 years. Allow me to introduce each of them briefly. More details are available online at the Global Affairs Center site for this program. Francisco Avaro. Francisco served in the U.S. Army in Vietnam, 1968 to 1969, where he was wounded and earned a Purple Heart. He was honorably discharged from the U.S. Army in December 1969. Since then, he has remained very active in Veterans Affairs. He is president of the Vietnam War Veterans of Washington State. Francisco is also Region 8 Director of the same, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. Did we get them all? Okay, and Wyoming, thank you. He was the first Hispanic veteran selected by the Department of Veterans Affairs to be part of a national study on Vietnam veterans and the effects of PTSD in the 1980s and 90s. Donna Lowry, Sergeant Major, U.S. Army retired. Donna, who hails from Eugene, Oregon, began her military career in the Women's Army Corps in June 1965. She was selected as one of the initial group of Army enlisted women to serve in Vietnam, arriving in 1967. She served 19 months in country and counts that time as one of her most interesting assignments. She retired from the U.S. Army in 1991 as Sergeant Major. She's a co-author of Women Vietnam Veterans: Our Untold Stories. She feels strongly that the world needs to know more about the courageous women who willingly served this country in a combat zone at a time when it was not seen as an appropriate thing to do. Bill Moore. Bill is a U.S. Army veteran with over 30 years of military service. He served in Vietnam as a senior district advisor 1967 to 1968. Other overseas assignments took him to Germany and South Korea. He retired from the U.S. Army in 1993 as a colonel. Charles Santiago. Charles served for 8 years in the U.S. Navy before coming to Shoreline as a student. He served in Iraq in 2010-11. He was honorably discharged from the Navy in July 2016. In his own words, he left the military with a purpose and some leftover courage and set out to leave his own mark on the world. We're very pleased that he decided to begin leaving his mark here at Shoreline, although I suspect he really began to do so in the Navy, perhaps even earlier. Jordan Smith. Jordan is an Alaska native and U.S. Army veteran. Jordan was honorably discharged from the U.S. Army in 2012. She graduated from Shoreline last year. It is our pleasure and honor to have her back on the staff of the Student Support Programs Office, supporting veterans and students with disabilities, while she works on a degree in social work at UW-Bothell. Please join me in welcoming them. Little housekeeping. Before we begin our discussion, I have a few items to mention. The emergency exits are in the back, where you entered, and the side door here. Restrooms are out the main doors and to the left, around this hallway. Coffee and tea are in the back of the room. Please help yourself. We are recording this event for later viewing. And during the Q&A part of the program, we ask that you use the microphone that will be brought to you when you ask your question, so all of us can benefit from hearing it. We get started?
Yep.
Yeah. So there was a teaser for this program. What have been the challenges faced by women and racial and ethnic minorities in the military over time, and how have they overcome or otherwise dealt with these challenges? How has their service, return home, and commemoration of their service been similar or different? In a little recent context, as I said, the theme for tonight is diversity and diverse voices in the military. In August, the first African-American woman was selected to lead West Point's 4,400-member Corps of Cadets as its first Captain Brigade Commander. On Monday, a federal judge partially blocked enforcement of key provisions of President Donald Trump's memorandum banning transgender people serving the military.
Good.
So we're going to start with some questions around service, and we're going to jump right in, folks.
Okay.
When you think about identity-related experiences you may have faced during your time of service, how is this similar or different to your experience in civilian life? We can go in any order, and whoever wants to answer. Doesn't have to be all.
Well, I was in the Army for 26 years, so by the time that was over, I was fortunate that the Washington State Department of Affairs hired me. So I went right to work for the state, and I didn't have any transition issues or any of that. And I've done a number of different things, but now I'm fully retired.
I think for me, I would have to put it in a historical context. You know, when I came back from Vietnam in 1969, this country, of course, was dealing with a lot of turmoil. We had assassinations. We had Martin Luther King was assassinated. Our president was assassinated earlier than that. His brother, the senator, was assassinated. We had the riots in East LA. And Vietnam was not something that people wanted to talk about. And so many of us who returned during that time were not welcome as perhaps we should have been as an American soldier defending this nation and fighting for the freedoms that we do now have and always have had because of soldiers, airmen, and Marines, et cetera, sailors. So, you know, you're dealing with a whole different perspective here because it's a historical perspective that doesn't quite formulate itself to what is happening today. You know, today our soldiers come home and they're paraded, they're welcome, and rightly so. And I think that's the way it should be. But for us, it wasn't like that, for many of us. So that's a little bit different. And it's very difficult to make a transition from that to a civilian life because even after we were discharged, honorably discharged, many of us, some of us were not, but most of us were, you were still not treated right in this country when you said you were a Vietnam veteran. So it was very difficult. And that's why many of us did not want to talk about Vietnam. It took me 20 years to begin to talk about Vietnam. In fact, many times I denied that I was even in Vietnam because I did not want to be treated wrongly. And I knew that racism existed. And it existed not only against me, but many of the other minorities that have served in Vietnam. Puerto Ricans, African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, you name it. And so this transition from being in the military to civilian life, I'm talking, of course, in historical terms, but I'm talking about a country that we all still live in, and that we're still part of, and that we still defend. That's where I'm coming from.
Maybe I should put it in historical perspective also. I finished ROTC in Tuskegee in 1964. That was in the heart, as you know, of civil rights and everything else. I went on active duty right after then, and in '67 I was getting ready to go to Vietnam. So I thought at least I could vote or get ready to vote since I was going over to protect their democracy. So I went to vote in Macon County, and they asked me, what was the signers of the Declaration of Independence? Well, I didn't know who the signers were. And so they said I was illiterate, even though I just had finished college. And about 7, 8 months earlier, my childhood friend, guy who I grew up with, named Samuel Young, he was trying to go into a restaurant, a men's restaurant in Tuskegee, and he was shot in the back of the head, murdered. Nothing ever happened. So here I am going to Vietnam to fight for their democracy, and I can't even vote. So as you know, I was not a happy camper. When I got over there, I was one of the few Americans, probably the only one around here, not to interact with American soldiers, Vietnamese soldiers. I was assigned as a senior district advisor to an ethnic group called Montagnard, which translated means mountain savage. So I interacted with them, we trained them, and we took them to battle. So it's interesting that, you know, about my experiences there. They were an ethnic group, so I really kind of identified with them. In fact, when I went around on exercises, the other Montagnard would call me the big Montagnard. So it's just different. When I came back, I went to ROTC duty at Cornell and was called a baby killer because I was in Vietnam. Not thank you for your service, but a baby killer.
Transition from military to civilian lifestyle was actually really smooth, and getting into the Navy, I don't know, I think that my most difficult, transition part was getting into the military. I wasn't used to structure or any of that stuff. I kind of still am not used to structure, but I never really had a problem with like race or being called a baby killer or any of that stuff. It's a lot different from, I'm sure, what they experienced. I came home to, people loving me and saying I did a great job, and I necessarily didn't do much. So it's strange. I can't imagine what these fine gentlemen and this lady has gone through or anything like that. I just, it's smooth sailing, I guess, for the sailor over here for me. So, yeah.
Thank you for your service. Each and every person on this panel, thank you very much. And I was a medic for the entire time I was in the service. My job varied depending on where I served. But I also did re-entry for a lot of soldiers, and I saw it from different perspectives. There would be people who greeted every single plane that came back because they felt that it was important that veterans knew that we cared for them because of what you're hearing today. So when the Vietnam vets came back, those type of interventions, community interventions designed to keep people in the boat, keep people healthy and safe and sane, those didn't really exist until later. They didn't exist at all until later. And the gentleman who just spoke, I'm sorry, I want to call you Santiago, but so when Charles just spoke, I respect what he's saying, but I also want to say that everybody's return is not smooth, Being a medic, I was also a forward support medic, and that means that I would be amongst the infantry units, and depending on the day, depending on the soldier, depending on the sound, I've seen people trapped in nightmares that they just cannot get out of. And that's with all the interventions that we have provided for them thus far. So I'm really surprised to be a part of a panel like this, and to be able to say that we care and to get the message out that these gentlemen and lady are able to share with us.
Thank you. Could you each speak to how you felt welcomed, or to the degree you did or didn't feel welcomed when you joined the service?
Service, I'm a volunteer. You know, I was interviewed by Joel Galloway right here on this campus. And I'm a volunteer for Vietnam on every single category. Volunteered for the United States Army, volunteered for infantry, volunteered for Vietnam. And as I told Joel Galloway, the reason I did that is because I'm a welfare child. I was on welfare most of my life as I was growing up until high school. And the reason that I did all that volunteering was because of my mother. My mother felt that since we were poor and we were on welfare, we owed this government something. And the only way that we were going to repay this government was for all her sons to go into the military. And she had 7 sons. And we all went into the military. And we were all Army. And so that is my story of how I ended up in the military. But how I was treated, I've already mentioned part of it. And I think Vietnam was different. It was a different war. It was a jungle war, much like the Pacific during World War II, not like in Europe, which was an urban warfare. But even then, again, to put it in a historical context, being a minority doesn't guarantee anything in this world. It only guarantees sometimes that you're going to be mistreated or not treated right or not treated fairly. And Vietnam was no different. If you were in infantry in Vietnam, most of the time, the people that were in point were minorities. Most of you saw, or some of you may perhaps have seen that movie, Full Metal Jacket, where there is a sniper and the person that they decide to put out there is an African American. And what is his response? Get the nigger to pull the trigger. Puerto Ricans weren't treated any different. Hispanics and Latinos weren't treated any different. Native Americans weren't treated any different. Asians weren't treated any different. Asian Americans. You know, that doesn't mean that we are not patriotic. That doesn't mean that we do not honor the code that we are supposed to defend this country. That doesn't mean that we are not brave or lack courage. In fact, minorities have a great deal to be proud of. Hispanics were awarded 14 Congressional Medal of Honors in Vietnam, not to mention Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, you name it. If you read a book titled Among the Valiant, you will learn about Hispanics in Korea in World War II, the most decorated of all. If you read about the 65th Regiment in Korea under General MacArthur, you'll understand that there was no other regiment that was the most highly decorated than they. And they were from Puerto Rico. And now I can bring it all the way back to where we're at. When Maria hit Puerto Rico, many American citizens did not even know that Puerto Ricans were Americans. Many do not know or do not realize that Puerto Ricans have served in this country in the military conflicts and in wars that we've been involved with. And the 65th Regiment is one of the most decorated regiments of all time. And they're all Puerto Ricans. Now, you know, the other thing about that, and some of you may or may not know this, even though they serve their country, and they serve in Vietnam, and they serve now in Afghanistan and Iraq, they can still not vote for the President of the United States. Think about that. They're willing to die for this country. They're willing to defend this country. They're willing to fight for our democracy, for you to sit there, for me to sit here, for me to get out of here, go to my car, go home, turn on the TV, and enjoy life. But yet they can't even vote. Think about that for a second. I'll let somebody else speak.
Well, I came from a proud tradition, being in Tuskegee. I grew up with the famed Tuskegee Airmen. I'm sure you probably saw the movie. And so I wanted to be a pilot. So I went to Tuskegee University, ROTC, with the thing of being a pilot, but I didn't realize that I couldn't see. You had to have 20/20 vision uncorrected, so I had to go in the Army. We had a different kind of curriculum. Being a traditional black school and very, prominent for the military, we had training that other ROTC students did not have. We had to train how to tell whites to do something because we were coming as an officer. Because in Alabama and the southern thing, it was tradition that blacks could not order whites around. So we would practice telling other African Americans, say, you're white here, so I'm going to tell you to do this. And that's how we did. And when I went on active duty, I ran across that. I had a guy who was from Lebanon, Kentucky. And I still remember his name. It was a buck sergeant. He came and wanted to see me. He said, sir, I just want to let you know from where I'm from, colors don't tell us what to do. And I said, Sergeant Beacon, that's his name, Beacon, I said, you don't have to break that tradition, but I will send your ass to the stockade. We ended up being very good friends after then. But it's just a different time and different age in terms of understanding what America was all about and how you operated in that kind of environment. And you really had to understand things because here we were supposed to go to Vietnam to do what? Stop the flow of communism, to support democracy. But yet people like me could not have democracy in my own hometown. When I got commissioned as an adjutant general corps, which means a paper pusher. I was so gung-ho, I told them, if I can't go infantry, I don't want to be in. And my daddy said, you one stupid ass. You know what they're going to do? They're going to give you infantry and send you to Vietnam, which they did.
Share with you about the women of that time. So I'm 70 years old. I'm a Vietnam vet, served 19 months in Nam. And the way that we handled things there, the first thing that happened for the women is that General Westmoreland asked the Vietnamese president was going to have a Vietnamese women's army. And so they asked for 2 of our trainers from Fort McClellan, Alabama, to go over and train the Vietnamese women. At that time, General Westmoreland decided that he wanted some military stenos to replace the civilian stenos he had on the staff. So that's how the military women first got over there. And I represent a group which is other than nurses. There's 863 of us that served in Vietnam. The interesting factor about this group of women is that our country has not recognized them. We just had last year, the DOD has been spreading for years a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the number of women non-nurses that served in NAM. And last year, they finally acknowledged that they have no idea that our records have been lost and that some of the women will never receive the recognition that they deserve. We have 288 women that are deceased already. Right now, we have one of the women who's 70 years old who's never gotten her benefits. And so I had to write a witness statement that I was with her in Nam so we can get what she's entitled to. Well, when we went to Vietnam, and I was part of the first group that went over, and we were at a WAC detachment. So we had a unit, and that unit, we had Class B uniforms. So we're in our skirt, we're in our heels, we're in a top, because in those days what happened was the women were not part of the regular service. So, for example, the Army had the regular Army, which was where the men were, and then we had the WAC, which is where the women were. So we would have, and this happened for the other services as well, we would have one colonel who would make all the decisions for your particular service. Our colonel, who became the one general, she decided it would not look appropriate for us to have any weapons. So if you can imagine going into a war zone and there are no weapons for us, that we have puffy hair because we have our own beautician in our compound to make sure that our hair is taken care of. We have a woman now, so this has been 50 years ago, and we were non-combatants, so that means that we were not considered like these guys who were combatants, right? They're the military. We were considered like family members. And so our unit did not have an evacuation plan. So we have a woman who has never gotten over the fact that she went to serve her country and there was no plan for our unit to be evacuated. So the women would have just been left there. I mean, there's nothing. We were closely monitored. We didn't get, Joe Galloway asked this question about the Stars and Stripes. We never got the Stars and Stripes because they never sent it from Japan. And one of the ideas I asked the first sergeant was they didn't want us to know what was happening with all the fighting and everything. So we never got any news the entire 19 months that I was over there. When it came time for us, and we first moved to Tonsanute Air Base, which is where we had Tent City B. So imagine a compound about 6 blocks long, and the WAC detachment was in there. We were separated by a small road, and then 5 rows of male tents. The engineers were sleeping in the tents, and then there is the perimeter, which is the golf course. That was our safety. No weapons, just over there. So we went for safety, and the whole USAV headquarters moved to Long Binh, 27 miles north of Saigon. And in Tet of 68, which was the biggest campaign of the war, the buildings that we had been in 1967 were destroyed, completely demolished. So if USAV had not gone and moved for safety, everybody would have been dead. In 1968, when we were over there, it's the craziest thing. When I tell people this story, they're just like, you must be kidding me, but I'm really not. So we have no weapons. And I, when I was at the Sergeant's Major Academy, got the actual notes from a meeting where they were discussing our safety. And so in those notes, they said, okay, if Charlie, so that's the enemy, comes with his AK-47, we're supposed to go in a particular ditch, jump up and kill him. And for 45 years, I've been asking, and what were we supposed to do? Was that our heels? Or, honestly, that was my first thought. And then one of my friends said, no, we were out of heels by that time. We were in jungle fatigues. We were supposed to hit them with our hairspray. And I'm like, can you imagine being in this situation where you love your country and that's why you are there and there is no protection for you? I mean, it's really, really a sad time. So I wanted to share with you what it was like for us. I mean, now, after the Army came in first, then we had the Air Force, we had the Navy, and we had the Marines there. And some of the Air Force, they'd be the only one at the base that they were at. I mean, it just depended. But the majority of women that went were about 700, and they were Army. About 200 were figuring the Air Force. 35 of them are Marines, and we found 4 more, and so that makes 12 of the Navy that were there. So it's an important thing because this group has been overlooked, and it was not until last year that DOD admitted they have no idea from this group who went. So unless you retired, they don't know about you. So we've got 288 women that are deceased. At that particular time, if you got pregnant, they sent you out and you got a dishonorable discharge. Can you imagine serving your country and you get pregnant and you get a dishonorable discharge? That's what happened to our women. And just like the men, when they came back to Oakland and they got out, they just took their ID card. They didn't even say thank you for your service. They didn't have anything else to do with them at that time. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share about these women.
I can't believe I have to follow this. Okay, so when I joined, I was just lost. I was a little lost in my life. I was still in high school, about to graduate. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I definitely knew I didn't want to go to school. And my mom kept pressuring me to get a job. And I was working at Subway, eating fresh. And I joined the Navy, and my goal was to, fight, be, front lines, do all that stuff. And I ended up being, what you were saying, a paper pusher. Yeah, that was my job, paper pushing. So I was really good at it, by the way. And basically, I joined. 3 months later, I went to boot camp, then school, and then from school, I got told I'm getting to a squadron. Squadron is in Iraq. So I was like, oh, cool, this is, I'm going straight to Iraq. So I went there, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was mid there, and I didn't do much. I really didn't do much. I was there for a long time, but I was the squadron only shoots jets out and everything, and you patrol the bases and stuff like that. It was a pretty big base. It was really smooth, very diverse. Like what you guys were saying, it's super diverse, and they push diversity like crazy. So that is a definite change. We definitely had like PowerPoint. You ever heard of Death by PowerPoint? We had those a lot about diversity and like racism and anything you can think of. We had Death by PowerPoint, and so it's crazy to hear that like people wouldn't welcome different minorities home, and then when I came home to see like everybody loves you, because it was a lot different when I was joining, and I would tell my friends that I'm going into the military. It kind of made fun of me and like, oh, you don't know what you're going to do with your life, and you're joining the military. And then it was funny to see that switch from when I came home to being like I'm this hero, and I did was push papers, So it was a big weird thing for me. So and everyone just like loves you and welcomes you home and thank you for your service, and it's weird to hear about these other stories from Vietnam and everything like that. I never experienced anything like that. It's a different military, I would say. Some things haven't changed, but most things have, and hopefully they keep progressing forward. But I had a lot of fun. I wouldn't do it again, but I definitely had a blast. I had a blast. It definitely improved my life more than you can imagine, and I'm happy to be here with these wonderful folks, and that's my story. So.
Thank you, Charles. I guess I'd be an interesting intersection between some racial things and gender things and modern things. I don't really know how to start this, but when I joined the Army, I knew that I wasn't a really good citizen, and I knew that I couldn't go to school and succeed. Like, those were messages that I received, and those were messages that I absolutely believed. And so they became true. So I snuck into the Army. I didn't tell my family. I got married one day at 18, and then the next day joined the Army, and then went home and told my mom. And then I called my dad and told him. And the Army was the best decision that I ever made. I would absolutely do it again, but only because the Army made me a woman. The Army taught me how to be responsible. The Army taught me how to have a voice. The Army taught me that I can be educated. But the Army also told me every single day that I was a woman. The Army also told me every single day that I was black. The Army told me every single day that I was different. And so there's like this really funny thing about being on time in the right place, in the right uniform, and then still being expected to have sex with the entire barracks. So how are you going to have respect for yourself when people are expecting you to, the term is put out. You're going to put out for a promotion. You're going to put out for a different thing, right? And so you either have to pretend to be gay, become gay, be stupid, or become extremely antisocial in order to protect yourself. Or you have to figure out a way in order to navigate the system to win. So we have people here from a different era who figured out how to navigate the system and speak on behalf of the people who do not have a voice right now. There's people who do not have their benefits. There are Tuskegee Airmen who died in service, who have yet to be respected and honored. There are women who will never be honored. And this dichotomy of respect, to be treated with respect constantly. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You know, in a space like this, it's obvious that I'm a veteran. You know, the card says it. I showed up here. But when I'm out in public, I don't dress like this. I generally don't wear makeup. I speak the same way. But I don't say that I'm a veteran because until I do, I get treated like a regular black person, you know, second-class citizen here, you know, whatever the particular bias is at the time that I intersect with somebody. And I also have my own biases that create the intersection. But when I say that I'm a veteran, all of a sudden it's like I move up a tiny bit in the social class and my credibility is raised. I had no credibility when I was in the Army. I had to have either someone of a higher rank, someone of a different color, or someone of a different gender to say Smith is telling the truth. And it's a really belittling feeling to say, why don't you show up and fight every day? Why don't you show up and do your best? Why don't you pay for your own uniforms? And then when you're in the different vehicles, you have your sergeants telling you to strap up and get out and pull it. And in all sorts of different racial, gender, there's a lot of violence that can happen. But I would do it again because it made me a woman. I was not able to communicate until I left the Army. You know, and I left by the skin of my teeth. But it saved my life because where I was headed before was absolutely nowhere. And so I just happened to make a right turn and a left turn, and now I'm here to tell my story. You know, most of it is luck. You know, half of it is just showing up and then living.
I would like to make a correction. I believe it was Mr. Delgado who said that the way that all minorities were treated when they came back from Vietnam, it wasn't just all minorities. It was the idea that if you were a Vietnam veteran coming back, well, it didn't make any difference what color you were. If you were a Vietnam vet, you were a baby killer. You were a drug addict. You were the worst you could be, you know. Also, if I may, you know, James Banks, I studied under James Banks at the University of Washington, probably one of the best known, if not the most known individual that writes about diversity in this country. As he put it when I took his class, and he's right, we don't write the history, you know. We may make history, but we don't write the history. And history begins from the east to the west. And so most minorities, if you look at it in a historical context, are in the Midwest and the West, except for the Native Americans who were in the East when the white folks arrived. But since we don't write the history, then our history is not out there. But we know our history, those of us who have read history. You know, if you look at conflicts and wars and police actions, as they call some of them, there are many groups that have served very proudly. One's already been mentioned here, Tuskegee Airmen, you know, the 65th in Korea. Tuskegee was World War II. Code Talkers, Navajo Code Talkers, World War II. The 442, all Japanese, fought in Italy when their parents were in concentration camps. The 201st Squadron, all Mexicans, fought in the Philippines. Only lost one plane, one pilot. That's history. And who are they defending? Who are they fighting for? The United States of America. But yet, what about their history? Where is it? Have you read about it? Have you picked up a book that says the U.S. history of America? Have you turned to some page where you can see this or read it? You know, those are the things that I'm interested in, because we're all interested in education and information sharing and gaining knowledge of who we are, what we're made of, what our character is, what we give to this country. You know. So that's what I wanted to say.
To piggyback real quick off you, I totally agree with what she was saying about the stigma with women inside the military, 100%. There's definitely division between men and women. And the putting out part is, I would say I'd never encountered it myself, but I definitely have heard stories about and seen women okay, so when men have working parties, or the whole group or the command has working parties, it was almost in spite of women that they couldn't pull their weight, so to speak, or they have to do more, or they're not doing enough, or you know what I'm saying. So it was that was a big thing I encountered with women that I noticed was in the military, is that they always got treated differently, almost harder. For them being a woman, it was almost harder for them because it's more work. You know, there was you need to work harder to be equal to us to do something. And I'll definitely agree with that, 100%. So it wasn't as strong where I was. I was up in Washington and then Hawaii, so it was very, very smooth. But there are definitely instances like that in the military still to this day. So yeah.
You all shared some powerful things. I want to thank each of you for some of the things that were just shared. I want to ask Donna and Jordan, in light of some of the things you shared, if there was a woman in this audience that was thinking about joining one of the branches of the service, what advice would you give her? What would you tell her?
I love this country, and so I would recommend that a woman go and serve this country. The important thing that I would say, and Jordan and I had talked about this previously when we had our interview, is despite the timing and how many years we are past the time that I was in, you'd have to be really careful about the relationships, with your supervisor, with the other people there, because it happens. I had the Army precedent-setting discrimination case because as a woman, I got promoted to sergeant major and nobody would give me a job. And what happened was that they investigated, found out it was true, and said one of the people that previously was in one of my companies, he put on the chief of staff of the Army's table my resignation based on discrimination. And so where the Army at that time, it was really rough on me, and really difficult. The end result of it was that they did their investigation, they apologized to me, they made me the 8th Army IG Sergeant Major, so I got my credibility back. I don't think that there's another profession in the world that can give you the satisfaction that you feel by being a member of the military and knowing that you're willing to die for this country because it's so important to you. So I got my undergraduate work, I got my graduate work paid for by the military because of my GI Bill. So I've learned so much as a person and expanded so much from that young person who didn't know anything. And I'd say if you have the opportunity, jump at it.
I guess when you're, 31 like myself, people can't tell how old you are. You can range between whatever age you look like in the morning to whatever age you look like at night. And I have young women still ask me about joining the military, and I agree. If that's what you want to do, I encourage you to do it. But if you have some hard questions, I encourage you to ask them. Just like what she said, just like what Donna said, I do talk about being safe as a woman in the presence of anybody else, because it's perceived as if you don't respect yourself, then no one is going to respect you. When really, that argument can be reframed if a woman is not respected for being a woman, what type of violence is going to be acceptable upon her, with her. And I also consider the race of the woman who's asking me. I also have young men ask me about it, and I also consider their race. I have young men who are new to this country say, oh, I want to join the Army. I hear that I'll be able to get my citizenship. And I say, you know what? If you join, we actually respect you more for going to get your citizenship because we know how hard it is for you. But I want you to know that you're going to be disrespected. And that's almost the biggest surprise to people is, well, what do you mean I'm going to be disrespected? I'm like, well, you're dealing with institutional racism. There are things that are acceptable against your personhood because of what you look like. And that is a big shock to people who are not from this country, that institutional racism, genderism, otherisms are still pervasive and acceptable. But I also explained the good things. The VA saved my life, and I go into that story depending on the woman, on how they saved my life. They paid for my education, are continuing to pay for my education, and my goal is to go work at the VA so I can continue to give back to the VA. I also explained to women that if you are deployed, your children are going to be legally signed over to someone else. A lot of people don't know that. When you go to another country to fight for your country, you cannot have legal responsibility over your biological children, because if you die, the paperwork needs to be in order for them to be taken care of stateside immediately. That goes for any single parent. I've seen fathers who are single parents do the same thing. I've seen a single mother of 6 do that. The sacrifice for the country is big. That's all I have for this question.
Francisco, you wanted to add something?
Say that, you know, for many women, like men who are minorities, the military is a way to improve your life. You know, it's a way to get out of where you're at. And sometimes you don't get good experiences when you're in the military, but it is a way to improve your life. You know, obviously it's a way to get an education. You can use your GI Bill. But I wanted to go back to make a couple of comments. You know, and again, I'm a history buff, and it's inconceivable to me, and maybe I hope you have thought about this, that we fought World War II for roughly 4 years, a little bit over 4 years. And during those years, not a single African American nor a single Asian American was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor. It took a black president to take care of that situation. After they did their investigations and found out that the bravery of the African Americans during World War II and the bravery of the Asian Americans, many of those errors were corrected. And a great number of African Americans were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, and so were Asian Americans. So, you know, I just cannot believe that these individuals went to war and not a single one belonging to that minority groups was ever awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor. It's not.
I think that what that is an example of power structures. You know, whose stories are getting told, who's being honored, who's being respected. And it's another way to write somebody else's history. I apologize for interrupting.
I'm gonna cut in real quick. It is definitely a power structure, 100% power structure. What I said is, like, I won't join again just because I'm a free bird and I'm all about being free and all that nonsense. I'm just living my life type stuff. But the only reason I wouldn't join is just because it didn't fit me as a person, not because I didn't like it. I had great experiences in the military. I had a blast. I've greatly improved my life. It gave me structure. It gave me discipline. It gave me a goal in life to complete. It got me from point A to point B and taught me how to get there. And that's one thing the military will do for you. If you have questions, ask a veteran. If you have questions, ask them the hard questions. Ask them what you really want to know, not the generic, like, what's it like in the military? What's this? Ask them the hard stuff. Ask them what you really want to know, because we will tell you. We will tell you straight up, and we will not hide anything. We're not We're not going to say, oh, it's all, fairy tales and pixie dust or whatever. It's hard. It's hard, and it's a power structure. It's a power climb. I worked with a lot of officers being enlisted, so I've seen what people will do to step on other people to get to a higher place in the military. That's what it is. It's a ladder. It's a ladder you got to climb if you want to stay in, and it's up to you if you want to do that. And you have to be willing to give up some freedoms and be willing to take some negative comments and some horrible stuff about like racism and discrimination and all that stuff. Sometimes you have to take that if you want to move forward and in the military. And it sucks that is what I'm saying, but that is just the truth. That's the way it is, and it's a lot easier than it is now, or it's a lot easier now than it was back then. I can say that. And but ask a veteran. Yeah, ask us what it's like. Come to us, ask us the hard questions. We're going to tell you the truth. But there's one thing that I guess we all agree is that it improves your life. It gives you that courage to stand up for yourself in a civilian setting. You know what I'm saying? It gives you the courage to lead, which is what I've learned, is to be a leader instead of a follower and to make your own choices. So, yeah.
Thank you. You've all talked in one degree or another about your return home and experience about that. How would you like your service to be commemorated?
Well, I think for the Vietnam veterans, right now, President Obama, of course, before he left office, he made the proclamation of honoring the Vietnam veterans with the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, which will last until, I believe, 2025. So we're having these ceremonies throughout the country, these events. We're having one in Redmond on the 10th. And we had Joe Galloway here in Shoreline Community College honoring Vietnam veterans and in the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. I think it's a way for this country to recognize what many of us that served in Vietnam went through. It's a way to honor us. It's a way to say that welcome home. Your treatment wasn't fair. It's a way to thank us. It's a way to give us the opportunity to not linger with the thoughts, the negative thoughts, and the unfair thoughts. You have to thank the Vietnam veterans, especially the new war veterans, Afghanistan and Iraq, because if it wasn't for the Vietnam veterans, there wouldn't be no PTSD legislation and compensation. If it wasn't for the Vietnam veterans of America and the Vietnam veterans, there wouldn't be no Agent Orange recognition. If it wasn't for the Vietnam veterans of America, there wouldn't be any legislation regarding toxins and dioxins that are affecting our children and our grandchildren. And we're trying to pass legislation on that now. So I think this country will someday recognize the Vietnam veteran and the courage and the bravery and the honor that they brought to this country. There was a series not long ago, just a week ago or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, Burns, who did Vietnam War series. That's still up in the air as far as how people are going to react about it. I've already heard some good things about it, and I've heard some negative things about it. We don't know yet. But I think, as Joe Galloway said, when was the last time you thought about Vietnam? And he said, last night. And it's true for many of us who served in Vietnam. But the good thing is that the Iraqi and the Afghanistan and future conflicts that we'll get into will be better off they will be treated much more fairly and much more welcoming home.
You know, I don't expect any kind of individual adulation or thing for me, but there's two things that I remember. One, I was hoping you guys are students, most of you are, that you will Google the Montagnard. That's a tribe in Vietnam that I worked with, served with, and all that. The indigenous tribe, mountainous tribe. You will not hear anything currently about the Montagnard. They are more than second-class citizens. They're third-class citizens, especially now that the Vietnam government is there. Their provinces are all about wiped out. So Google that, Montagnard, and you'll be interested in that. I think I told you earlier that when I went to Vietnam, I was not a happy camper because I could not vote, and that my best friend, that I grew up, childhood friend, was killed. I was telling that to a Secret Service officer that I knew, and he knew the governor of Alabama, and he told him that. And in 1987, 20 years later, I received in the mail from him, and it was specially delivered, a proclamation from the governor appointing me as a honorary admiral in the Alabama Navy.
Oh, no.
And that just shocked the hell out of me. But you know, things sometimes go round. Things in this world go round. So I think my thing is that you do what you know is right. And from there, whatever comes out will be to your advantage. I was just amazed about what the females here said about their service. And to be very honest, I was pretty ignorant of that because, again, my background was infantry, and that's combat arms, and that's male soldiers fighting. And I always said the worst thing, the most powerful drug, is an 18-year-old with testosterone, just like him. He want to go fight. I mean, the young kids, boys, people understand the power. Young people go to war. Old people direct the war. And so that's what we have to be vigilant about, especially now in this country, that we don't get into a crazy, and you have to raise your voices, encounter for nothing, for ego, because war is hell. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. And I don't want to be too serious about it, but I think we're in serious times that we need to look at where we're going as a nation and how we look at the armed forces. They're there to protect us, not to go and to create our power on other people of the world.
I don't want any recognition for myself. I'm a retired sergeant major. You know, everybody knows I'm a Vietnam vet or whatever. But I have a strong feeling that I want these women recognized, these 863 total. And I have to tell you, this is the group that's been completely overlooked. People don't know. They're not getting the recognition. They're dying. But when I started this book back in 2013, the National Archives gave me 5 pictures. These are supposed to be Vietnam vets. 3 pictures are of a friend of mine, Sherry Asmus, at the reception station while she was having her hearing test, not when she was in Vietnam. The other was 2 pictures of an Air Force woman. That's all they had. Now what's happened is next week I am going to the National Archives, and I'm going on the first day of their exhibit, Remembering Vietnam. I'm an honorary member of their honorary committee, and I will be speaking to over 1,000 people, I'm told, on the subject of these women. That's what I want to be able to do. The Freedoms Foundation flew me out to Valley Forge for me to give a presentation. So there were 60 graduate teachers from around the country, and I got to go and present this story. So it's important to me that I get them honored. Now, I have for the book, I did a PowerPoint presentation. It's got 38 PowerPoints and then 49-page lesson plan. I give it to anybody that wants it. The DOD is going to be putting it on the website. All you have to do is ask for it, change your name. My name, put your name on there. Just go out and educate the world. That's what is important to me, that we don't have these women overlooked.
I 100% agree with everything. I think recognition is a big part of it. I wouldn't say individual recognition as so much. And I work in the Veterans Center here, and I speak to a lot of the vets, and I don't think any of them want individual recognition. I think it's just recognition as a whole for ourselves that we did serve, and recognition for our fallen brothers and sisters is big for their service. And but I want to press support more than anything. It's just support. My biggest thing getting out was I was scared. I was scared I wasn't gonna fit in properly. People weren't gonna be there for me like some of the people that were in the military, because it's a very tight community. We kind of stick together. And but when I came here, I was very worried about the whole school system and people just supporting me, just being able to be there. I could talk to them about the transition, which is really hard. And I met Missy Anderson, and Derek Levy came by, and I met him shortly after. And they're pushing great services here at this school. Like, we have Got Your Six, which is amazing. It's training for both faculty and staff, and our students can do it as well. But all it does is help them better recognize how hard it is to transition from a military lifestyle to a civilian lifestyle. It's very difficult fitting in. I'm sure some of you who are taking classes here have seen a veteran in your class of some sort. It's usually have a beard, sitting in the back, not talking to anyone. Kind of lonely. It looks mean all the time. We're not mean. We don't know how to talk to people that are not military members. We need you guys to come up to us and talk to us. Or we try our best. We're just trying our best to fit in. That's what we're trying to do, is blend in as much as possible, not stand out. So I think supporting us, coming to the Vet Center and learning about us, learning about what we've done and what we do now. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is I want to be able to go to other schools with less of a veterans program, and I want to be able to see people who are interested in us, are interested in this. And there's empty seats here, is what I'm saying. Support is our biggest thing, because it sucks when you come back. I can't even imagine. It sucks when you come back and people are not there. People don't care. That's the worst feeling you can get, because you served. You fought for the country in any which way or form, and it just sucks to not be recognized and supported by people that we fought for to protect. The freedoms that just to sit here now is the biggest thing. So just show your support and come to these things. Go to the flag raising ceremony. That's November 7th. I think that is the best way that you can do for us veterans. So, in my opinion.
Good point.
I guess the horse has been beat to death here. It's not about personal recognition. It's about recognition of the whole. Knowing history seems to be a very interesting topic for a country that, when you look around, everything is new. Nothing seems to really represent how things were 10, 15, 20, any amount of time. And just realizing that there's a lot of different stories, I'm a black woman who's also Alaskan Native, and I didn't even know how many stories there were. Like, my son, he's half Dominican. It was like him being born just kind of opened up my world a little bit more to realizing that the people that I served with, even though I knew they were from all around the world, it didn't occur to me that their struggles would be different from my own. Like, it didn't even enter my mind. And I that's the thing that I want to express is that everyone has a very different story. And what keeps us together is the uniform and our love for the nation. And I think that's really that all I had, just keep in mind that there are differences.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the audience if they'd like to ask a question. We have a microphone that'll be working itself around if you just want to raise your hand.
My name is Cav from Shoreline Community College. So it sounded like there's like an older generation in the military, and then the younger generation. That's how I feel like. No, I didn't really mean it that way, but
More experienced.
yeah, exactly. How, as a Vietnam vet, how are you guys like looking at the younger generation? Like, for example, like you guys are more like suffering from the enemies or suffering from the social issue, that kind of problems. I hear a lot of that kind of problems, and then on the right side, I hear a lot of more like questions like I might. It like sounded like what I struggle with, something like that, It's like a more like personal kind of struggle, and you guys have like some kind of like suffering and fear, and then struggling with like a society. That's how I sounded like. So how are you guys looking at the younger generation as a old generation?
And the reason I do, because they are, from my perspective, I have daughters, 4 daughters, so in my household I never got any kind of argument. But they are more accepting. Now, you got to understand, all of them from a different generation. I came up in the 60s, where there was really, really segregation and discrimination. And being an officer, I was one of, not many officers were black. When I went on active duty, I had my black sergeant who was so proud of me. He would come in my office every morning to make sure that I looked strike, as he called it. In other words, my uniform, my hair was all taken care of. It was that kind of thought. And we were in a country much different than today, even though there was blatant discrimination and all that. The opportunity was less. I had to go to places on base, for entertainment. I can go to Costco. We didn't have a Costco. So I went to the commissary in PX. So it was just a different era, and all of us represent a different era. But I think the biggest thing is that the military is really a microcosm of the society that we all live in. But the military, because of structure, you can oftentimes navigate it differently and more successfully. Just because I was officer and had rank, I didn't have to put up with some stuff that I would do on the outside. I just said, do it, and they did it. So it's just a different in that kind of thing, the structure. Wouldn't you say? Yeah.
I would say that it is our responsibility, if not our obligation, to pass on what we have learned to the new generation of veterans. Our motto, Vietnam Veterans of America, is never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. Because we know what it's like. We lived it. And we don't want our brothers and sisters from Afghanistan and Iraq and other places in this world where we're involved in to go through the same thing. And I think we've been successful. That is why they're not treated like we were treated. That is why their GI Bill has increased tremendously. That is why when a life is lost in Afghanistan and in Iraq, their benefits and their families' benefits are sky high compared to a Vietnam veteran that was killed in Vietnam. His life was worth $10,000. That's all. So I think we have the obligation to pass this on to the new generation of veterans so that they will be treated fairly. I think Vietnam Veterans of America has done a good job.
I think I'm going to add a little contrast to that. They had it way harder than I think we had it. Way harder. Not only when you were joining, there was like physical abuse, which they can't do now. But when they got out, obviously they had to deal with a lot of social, like you were saying, a lot of social abuse. And getting out, I didn't have to deal with that. I had an easy boot camp. I just got screamed at. I didn't get beat like I didn't. I worked out a little bit, but compared to what they had it way harder. And I don't know, I'm coming from the easy millennial era, so and I'm only seeing it getting easier and easier with boot camp getting they can't scream at you without people getting it's getting more easy. So kudos that's they had compared to what I'm this is nothing me joining compared to the Vietnam era. This is it's easy day for me. So.
And I do think that it is our generation, that the three of us, all of the people that are Vietnam vets, we do not want to have the next generation and the next generation to suffer like some of these people are. I mean, we still have people that have severe PTSD and 50 years later are having nightmares. That is just unacceptable. So I think, I was telling Jordan, I was so happy when we were talking about some things. When I hear people talk about PTSD now, there was no term when Vietnam vets came back. I know a couple of guys from Chehalis that when they came back, one went to the bush for 3 years, the other one went to the bush for 5 years in Centralia because they could not deal with it. There were no programs. Today, it's like you talk to people and they say, yeah, I have PTSD. I love that they can feel good and that people are not looking at them like they're crazy, that they're going to get angry, that they're going to be a problem. I mean, we've come so far with that I am just really, really pleased.
Hi, my name's Jason. Kind of bouncing off the ideas of Francisco and Donna, I have a two-part question for the Vietnam era vets. How do you think the Vietnam era affected mental health care in the military? And what were the attitudes towards people with mental illnesses?
I think we've changed a great deal. First of all, PTSD, we keep using that acronym, but it's for post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? That's what it stands for. World War II, they used to call it shell shock, It wasn't such a thing then. But I think, and I mentioned this earlier, it's because of the Vietnam veterans who, many of us returned back, many of us hid, many of us have little communities. We still have little communities, believe it or not, of Vietnam veterans in this country. Humboldt County, California, Hawaii, North Carolina, Georgia, you name it. We have little communities of veterans that don't want to be part of the big society, the big America, because of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mental problem, and it doesn't go away. It will be with you for the rest of your life. I have it, and so it didn't exist. But because of the Vietnam veterans and because of all the studies that we forced the VA to do, they recognized it. And so that's the big change. That's the big mental health change. And it's part of the system now. That's why many of the Afghanistan and Iraq veterans that are coming back, they also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's recognized. And not only recognized, It's part of the system, the mental health system. I still go see my shrink once a month at the VA hospital. It doesn't go away. The comment about combat is hell, war is hell, it's true.
You know, it wasn't something that you discussed when you came back from Nam. You hid it from people. You know, you didn't get any help because there was no help out there, I mean, for anybody to give you. So people have really suffered from that 50 years later, and they're still having nightmares. I mean, it's awful. It's awful that that is happening to them. So now we talk openly about mental health, you know, and that's what we should be talking about. You know, what somebody said to me about somebody going to Iraq, and this young man was explaining that, you know, I have PTSD, and, you know, yeah, people know that I have it, and they say, well, you should have it. Under those circumstances, you know, you should have it, so it's not a problem. That's a big change from when we came back, you know, so I really like it that there are programs in place for the younger veterans so that they don't have to suffer. Can you imagine not being able to talk to anybody about that, especially the men? Because they're macho, and there they are, the infantry guys, which I've known Bill for a long time. So here we have it. You think that he would discuss something that would happen to him over there? No. I mean, because it just wasn't something manly that you would do. You would just suffer in silence.
I'm sucking it up.
I'm glad those days are over.
Hi, my name is Malia. So first I want to give some background from what I think you guys were saying. So I heard that the younger people are going into the war, but the older people are ruling the war, or not the war, but like the troops and everything. But it kind of sounds like the younger generation is a little surprised by all of the stories that you have told, and if they're kind of supposed to go in there and be leaders and try to change the way that people are discriminated against, but they don't know about the history. I mean, are you guys kind of surprised by that? Or, I mean, is there anything about history that is taught into the people that go into the military before they enter the service, or anything like that?
Well, I think you kind of correct on your assessment. I did a presentation at Puget Sound College in Puyallup. And it dawned on me that all the students there didn't know anything about Vietnam. Not even the fathers, but the grandfathers. Americans are notorious for not understanding history. And that, you know, sometimes it's going to come to roost on us, because we have to understand history not to really create some of the things in the future. But, you know, so I think your assessment is correct. The things that we went through, the younger generation said, what? How did you do that? And we were looking at the younger generation saying, oh, maybe you had it easy. And it's not easy. There's nothing easy about any of this. But it's that we tend to forget. We forget things that are hard. When I be in infantry again, in infantry, if somebody said, oh, I got problems, I can't sleep in it, it would say, hey, you need to suck it up.
Yeah.
You need to come, you know. And that stayed that way for a while. And that's the reason that many Vietnam veterans, at one time, I think, like, I could be wrong about statistics, about 40% of the homeless people, men, were Vietnam-era veterans. And somehow, and they didn't go to the VA for medication, they medicated on booze. And then, I don't know when that changed, but the whole thing about mental health changed. And then, so it's a good area now that people are talking about it and getting treated for the things. I don't know if I had post-stress. I know there are certain things I still can't deal with. You know, things on TV like shoot 'em up, bang, bang. I won't watch it. I go to the movie and I just say, oh, I got to go get something, and I just leave. And I'm sure that has something to do with it, but I'm too dumb to figure it out. So I just leave the situation.
I also think that that was the Vietnam era is something that you didn't talk about. You know, they got spit on. You know, they got called baby killers. It was something that they weren't honored when they came back. It was something that you don't just speak about. And I know my dad went to Vietnam, and I still don't really know what happened over there. He doesn't speak about it. It's just, like she was saying, it's just one of those things you don't talk about, and it's still kind of a stigma that way today. Like, it's more awareness of trying to bring more awareness to Vietnam, but like, there's still not enough. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference. Is like, yeah, and we're really bad at remembering our history. I know when I joined, I knew nothing about the military. Nothing. I was joining blind. You know, and then when you talk to recruiters, they're not going to tell you. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to tell you, oh, this is what Vietnam was like. This is what they went through. No one's going to say anything like that. They're just going to want you to come in. They want you to join. So yeah, that was just an era that nobody really speaks about. It's like a dark mark in the military history. You know what I'm saying? So I think bringing more awareness to it alone nowadays is what we should do. Yeah. So.
Not a time.
This is a follow-up to that. To what extent is this unique, this not wanting to talk about it, unique to the Vietnam generation? I'm thinking my now deceased father-in-law was a veteran of World War II. And it was only after he passed that the family found a lot of papers and they found out more about what he did. We knew in general terms what he did. He served in the Navy, in the Pacific, for the 7 years from the time that Pearl Harbor was attacked until after, and it was before that even. But he was in some pretty horrendous battles, but they didn't really know about that. So I'm just wondering, there's a tendency, maybe this is the exception, the 21st century generation where we do talk about, although I've got friends who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they don't talk about it very much, and I don't ask very much because I'm not sure they want to talk about it very much. So I just wonder how unique this is.
We do it all the time. The most forgotten war is the Korean War. They had their own issues and own thing, but there's some of the same themes run through. We forgot about them. They had post-traumatic stress. They call it shell-shocked. They, when they came home, we didn't say, glad for your service. We just say, okay, you're back now. But it repeats itself. The only thing that don't repeat itself is the people who commemorate the Civil War. Think about that for a while. Just think about it. It's just the Civil War. That's a different thing. And I won't go on that, but that's...
Jordan, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I've lost the train of my thought. Sorry.
Okay. Bill, I want to thank you on behalf of my dad and many others for mentioning the Korean War, because that is the main thing he shared with his children was the forgotten war. He was very involved with his VFW, but he did not share. But he you know, I think it was different also with even his children, civilians, versus other service members who could relate to his buddies. I want to ask you all to please join me in giving our panel of veterans another round of applause and thank them for